Deep within the echoes of time, the forgotten files awake.
Good evening and welcome back. Tonight we're descending into shadow, far below the earth, past the lands of the living, into a realm ruled not by time, but by silence and memory. This is the Greek Underworld. A place of rivers and gates, judges and punishments, ghosts and gods. A world watched over by Hades and Persephone. We'll explore its origins, its many regions, its terrifying guardians, and the myths that shaped the ancient imagination of death and what comes after. As always, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Whether you're lying in bed or wandering the edges of sleep, this is your moment to rest. This is a tale as old as morning itself, a story thousands of years old, and tonight, it's all yours. Before Olympus rose in gleaming marble, and before the thrones of the gods were forged upon the heights of the world, there was only the great silence. No fire burned, no wind stirred, no sun broke the stillness with its light. The cosmos, in its earliest form, was a thing without form, without motion, without end or border. From this boundless void came the first breath of existence, not with a shout or a flash, but with the slow whisper of being itself pulling itself from the absence of being. The ancients called this first state chaos, not the turmoil of war, not the clamour of voices, but the yawning emptiness, the gaping chasm where no time yet flowed and no gods yet watched. It was from chaos that all came, and to chaos that all would someday return. From within, that nothingness stirred the first powers. Not beings as men understand them, not even as gods are later known, but vast impersonal forces, primordial and unmoulded, yet alive. The earth was among the first to rise, Gaia, who would become the mother of mountains and rivers, of mortals and immortals alike. She rose like a slow tide from the void, spreading her broad back beneath the sky that had not yet been born. Alongside her came Nyx, the night, deep and cloaked and eternal, whose black veils would one day fall over every realm and every heart. And Erebus, the darkness within darkness, who cloaked the world before even shadows knew how to fall. But of them all, it was Tartarus that stirred deepest and most dreadfully. Tartarus was not merely a place, nor a creature, but a presence that breathed from below. If Gaia was the body of the earth, Tartarus was the pit beneath her bones, the abysmal void far beneath the surface of the world. The poets of old said that a bronze anvil, cast down from the height of Olympus, would fall for 9 days before reaching the earth, and 9 days more it would fall from earth before it reached Tartarus. It was a place not of mere distance, but of scale beyond comprehension, a chasm so deep that even the sky seemed close in comparison. Here, light could not reach. Here, the laws of the upper world did not apply. It was not hell, nor was it death. It was the place before both. The Titans had not yet fallen. The stars had not yet formed their wheels across the heavens, but already Tartarus waited in the dark beneath the future, patient and unknowable. Though he was called by name, Tartarus had no eyes and no form, only a boundary of existence that no god would ever fully master. In the age before history, before the lineages of gods were etched in song, Tartarus existed as the deep mirror of the world above, the under of the under, a counterweight to the birth of life. Gaia was fertility, Tartarus was finality. If Gaia held up the mountains, Tartarus was the place where mountains went to die. The very presence of Tartarus gave weight to the world, anchoring it in a terrible gravity no mortal would ever escape once drawn too near. The Greeks of later centuries would speak of Tartarus as a dungeon, a place of punishment for the worst of souls, a vault of eternal torment. And so it became. But in this earliest age, before gods and laws, Tartarus was a womb of darkness, not yet shaped by judgment. It was a realm of silence where the future evils of the world might someday be chained, but where for now, only the potential for ruin lay sleeping. It was the deepest secret of the cosmos, the first shadow cast by the first light. And like all shadows, it would lengthen and take form only when that light began to grow. Thus it was that from chaos came the first stirrings of the world, not in fire or thunder, but in depth and darkness. The underworld was not born in rebellion, nor was it forged in wrath. It was born alongside the world, beneath the world, and it has always been there. Long after the first shadows stirred beneath the earth and the yawning void of Tartarus had settled beneath the bones of Gaia, a new age emerged from the stillness. The ancient world, once silent and shapeless, began to fill with sound. Mountains rose like the backs of sleeping beasts, and rivers wound their way through the veins of the land, and into this shaping came the first great powers of will and ambition. Gaia, ever fertile and vast, gave birth to Uranus, the sky that arched above her with 1,000 stars burning in his breast. From their violent and enduring union came the Titans, a race of colossal immortals who bore the raw strength of creation within their bones. They ruled the heavens and the earth without rival, for there were no rivals yet to challenge them. Time itself was born when Cronus, the most cunning of the Titans, took his blade and overthrew his father Uranus, spilling the sky's blood across the world and casting down the old order in favor of his own dominion. Yet even as Cronus built his throne upon the bones of his father, the old prophecies stirred. Gaia, ancient and terrible in her memory, whispered of the curse he had sown. Just as he had overthrown his father, so too would one of his own children rise to overthrow him. Cronus, filled with fear and pride, devoured his offspring as they were born, swallowing them one by one and binding their immortal forms within the prison of his own body. But fate does not sleep forever. When the 6th child was born, Rhea, weary of grief, hid the infant away and gave Cronus a stone swaddled in cloth. Cronus swallowed the false child without question, and the real son, Zeus, was hidden far from the eyes of his father, cradled in secret upon the slopes of Mount Ida. When Zeus grew strong, he rose against the tyranny of the Titans. The war that followed was not a struggle of mortals, nor a clash of men with swords and shields, but a cataclysm that shook the roots of the world. Thunder split the heavens, and fire rained from the skies, as gods and titans waged war across the mountains and seas. This was the Titanomachy, the great war of succession and vengeance, where the younger gods, children of Cronus, allied with monstrous beings and ancient forces to bring down the old reign. Zeus, in his wrath, freed the Cyclopes and the 100-handed giants from the prisons where Cronus had cast them, and they repaid him with gifts of immense power. To Hades they gave a helm of shadow, to Poseidon a trident that could shatter the earth, and to Zeus himself the lightning that would become the symbol of his kingship. Armed with these tools of war, the Olympians rose against the Titans and cast them down in a storm that lasted a decade. When the last of the Titans fell and the war had ended, the new gods stood amid the ruins of the world they had inherited. The Titans who had fought against the Olympians were bound in chains of unbreakable adamant and hurled into the pit of Tartarus, that ancient abyss whose mouth gaped still beneath the deepest roots of the world. There they were, locked behind bronze gates and ringed with walls that no force could break, guarded by the 100-handed ones who had once been prisoners themselves. Zeus, having led the revolt and struck down Cronus with his own hands, claimed the sky as his throne. The bright air and storm-wreathed heavens would be his dominion, and he would be the king of gods and men. To Poseidon, who had shattered mountains and split the seas during the war, Zeus granted dominion over all waters, from the deepest ocean to the streams that wound through valleys and mortal lands. To Hades fell the third realm, drawn by lot and sealed by divine law. He did not speak out in protest, nor seek to alter the judgment. He accepted the realm that was granted him, though it lay far from the sunlight and the joy of Olympus. Hades descended into the depths of the earth and made his seat beneath the world, claiming the underworld as his own. He did not inherit it as a prize, nor take it by conquest, but took possession of what had always been waiting. In the endless gloom and damp silence of the underworld, he made his home. From the darkness of the rivers to the mist-shrouded plains where the dead wandered, he built his kingdom stone by stone and law by law. He was not banished nor cast down. He was crowned by fate and by the will of the gods. In the cavernous halls of black basalt and iron-veined rock, Hades shaped his dominion with the stern patience of one who knows that time bends toward him. From the banks of the Styx to the shores of Acheron, he watched as the dead came to him in their multitudes. His halls filled not with laughter, but with silence, not with rejoicing, but with the rustle of forgotten names. Where Zeus ruled over light and thunder, and Poseidon over wave and salt, Hades ruled over the finality of all things. All men, all kings, all glories would one day find their way to his gates. His was the kingdom without rebellion, for none could escape its boundaries once crossed. No hero, no thief, no lover or liar could stand before him and walk away unchanged. Thus was the underworld claimed not through ambition, but through the natural order of things. The war among the gods had reshaped the cosmos, and from that divine conflict arose 3 thrones and 3 crowns. Hades, though cloaked in shadow and seldom spoken of with love, ruled a realm that no other dared challenge. Beneath the mountains, beneath the forests and cities of men, beneath the bones of the oldest giants, he sat upon his throne of obsidian and watched as the dead returned to him, as they always had and always would. His dominion was absolute, his walls impenetrable, and his power quiet, enduring, and patient. The underworld, once a formless void beneath the feet of Gaia, had become a kingdom, and Hades, the eldest of the sons of Cronus, was now its king. After the war of the gods had cooled, and the last screams of the Titans had sunk into the chasms of Tartarus, the world settled into its new shape, with its realms divided by law and chance, each sovereign guarding his dominion with the weight of unspoken oaths. In the realm beneath the realm, where daylight never reached and the soil itself gave no scent of life, Hades began to take measure of what was his. He found himself lord over a country ancient even in its stillness, carved from silence and shadow and time. It was not a blank place, though many above thought it so. It was a land with features and limits, with currents and terrain, with rules older than Olympus, and paths older than memory. To govern this kingdom, Hades needed no sword and no war horn. The terrain itself obeyed him, and it did so with the obedience of inevitability. The land of the dead was marked not by borders etched in stone, but by rivers that coiled like veins through the darkened earth. These rivers were not streams of water as the living knew it, but flowing forces of emotion and memory, each carrying the essence of the world that lay above and the truths hidden beneath it. They did not nourish, they divided. The first of these, and the most feared, was Styx, whose name carried with it the weight of finality. It was called the Hateful River not because it hated, but because it bore the hatred of the living toward the dying and of the dead toward those who still drew breath. It circled the underworld 9 times and formed a barrier not even the gods dared to cross lightly. When Zeus sought to bind his kin to their oaths, it was upon the Styx that those promises were sworn. For if a god broke a vow made upon that river, they were cast out of Olympus for a cycle of years, stripped of nectar, ambrosia, and voice. The Styx flowed cold and dark and still, and its banks were choked with silence. Beside it flowed the Acheron, the river of woe, whose current was thick with sorrow, and whose echo carried the lament of every soul who had died too soon or too cruelly. The Acheron did not rage or roar, it groaned. Its voice was low and unending, a murmur of grief that filled the ears of those who wandered near it. It was across the Acheron that the dead were ferried into the realm of Hades, carried by the grim oars of Charon, who neither spoke nor listened, but simply waited with his hand outstretched for the coin that would grant passage. Those who had been buried with care, who had their eyes closed and their tongues given copper, were allowed to cross. Those who had been denied the rites of death, who had died alone or unloved, stood upon the shore and waited. They waited for years or centuries, until time wore down the boundary between life and death, and Charon at last took pity or patience itself broke. Beyond Acheron coiled the Phlegethon, a river of fire whose flames did not consume flesh, but seared the soul. It burned beneath the rock and glowed with the heat of fury and passion unresolved. It was said that the condemned heard their own voices screaming within its flame, for the river bore with it the heat of crimes unatoned and desires unquenched. Its glow cast flickering shadows across the stone halls of the underworld, and its light illuminated the walls of Tartarus, where the worst of all beings were sealed in chains that even gods feared to forge. Near to it flowed the Cocytus, the river of lamentation, filled with the weeping of those who refused to die. Its waters were cold and thick with despair. The souls who had drowned or been betrayed or died clinging to life drifted within it, their fingers grasping at nothing, their eyes wide with questions that would never find an answer. The sound of the Cocytus was the sound of endless mourning, a lullaby of loss that soothed no one. The spirits who came near its banks often grew quiet, forgetting their names as they stared into the grey current and felt their memories unspool like thread into its depths. And then there was Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, pale and slow and winding. The souls that drank from Lethe were not condemned nor punished. They were simply unmade in part. They shed their names, their regrets, their loves and guilts, until they could pass into the great plain of the dead without burden. In later ages, some whispered that those who drank of Lethe might be born again into the world of the living, cleansed of all memory. But in Hades' time, Lethe was a mercy and a surrender. It was the river most sought by those who had suffered too much, and most feared by those who clung still to some thread of their past life. To forget was to be free, but also to be less. These 5 rivers together shaped the map of the underworld. They did not run in straight lines, nor did they end. They bent and twisted, looping back upon themselves and flowing through caverns and tunnels that even Hades did not always trace. They were not paths, they were boundaries. And for the souls who came to the underworld, they marked the moment of no return. To cross the Styx was to be dead in truth. To drink of Lethe was to no longer remember what it had meant to live. The rivers divided the world above from the world below, and once their currents had touched a soul, that soul belonged to the kingdom of Hades. It was said in the oldest temples that when a man died, he began to hear water, first a distant trickle, then a rush, and by the time his heart had stilled, he stood at the banks of one of these rivers, staring into its flow. There, beneath a sky that did not change and upon a shore of dust and bones, he would begin the second part of his journey. He would no longer see the sun, he would no longer feel warmth, but he would hear the rivers, and he would walk forward. Beyond the rivers that cut through the underworld like ancient wounds, deeper still beneath the crust of the world, lay the true breadth of Hades' kingdom. Though the dead crossed the rivers in multitudes, they did not all arrive at the same destination. The underworld was not a single hall or a hollow cavern, but a realm with depth and tier, a vast dominion carved by fate and governed by law. Hades, seated in his throne of black stone, did not hold dominion over a featureless land, but over a world with its own topography and soul, a world with chambers of punishment, plains of forgetfulness, and gardens of reward. These regions were as old as the gods themselves, each molded by the needs of justice, the instincts of memory, and the architecture of myth. The deepest realm of all was Tartarus. This was no prison built by hands nor cave shaped by water. Tartarus was a void of depth beyond reckoning, a place so far below the earth that it seemed to exist beneath the concept of place itself. Even the gods feared its name, and none entered it, save to cast others in. It was here that the Titans, once proud lords of the world, lay shackled in darkness, bound in chains of bronze, and silenced by the will of Zeus. Their cries never reached the surface, their oaths dissolved into the blackness, and their stories ended in stone. Tartarus was more than a pit. It was the consequence of rebellion, the response to hubris, the natural result of a cosmos ruled by order. Here time passed without rhythm, and flame burned without light. Those who were sent into its depths ceased to matter in the world above. They became names carved into stone, memories half remembered in whispers, warnings told to children and kings. And though it was the destination of the worst offenders against the divine, it was also the bedrock upon which the rest of the underworld was built. Beneath all was Tartarus, and from it the rest of Hades' dominion drew its shape. Above Tartarus stretched the endless grey of the Asphodel meadows. This was the place where most souls came to rest, the quiet fields that stretched from one forgotten hill to another. There was no sun in Asphodel, nor was there night. The sky hung low and pale without colour, and the air neither stirred with breeze nor sang with birds. The souls who gathered there were countless. They wandered in slow, thoughtless patterns, their faces dim with the erosion of time. These were not villains nor heroes. They were the common dead, the multitude of lives that had neither broken oaths nor saved cities, neither defied the gods nor stood beside them. Farmers and sailors, weavers and shepherds, mothers and merchants. Their names were not written in stone nor preserved in legend. They were remembered by no one. In life they had loved and suffered and worked, but in death they had no deeds to speak for them, and so they came to Asphodel. The meadows were named for the pale flowers that grew across their fields. These blossoms were not vivid like those above, but white and faintly glowing, their petals thin as mist and their stems without scent. The shades walked among them endlessly, not in torment, but in a silence too complete to be peace. Sometimes they spoke in murmurs, fragments of the lives they once lived slipping between their lips. A name, a place, a face, then silence again. In these fields, the Lethe wound through the dust, offering forgetfulness to those who desired it. Many drank and lost themselves entirely. Others sipped and clung to fragments. Few held on to everything. And so the asphodel fields filled with the drifting remnants of memory, like leaves fallen and never gathered. Here, the dead existed. They did not suffer, but they did not rejoice. They continued. Yet beyond the meadows, far across the rivers, and veiled by mists of rose-colored air, lay the lands of the blessed. The Elysian fields, that secret country of brightness and music, waited for the rarest of souls. In the earliest ages, it had no fixed place. Some said it was at the edge of the world, where the western winds blew gently from the sea, and the stars danced in wreaths above the grass. Others believed it was a hidden chamber within the underworld, protected by walls that only the righteous might pass. Wherever it lay, the Elysian fields were not given to the many. Only those who had lived with honor and virtue, those who had pleased the gods with their words and deeds, those who had carried justice like a torch through the dark paths of life, might hope to enter. In Elysium, the fields were always green. The sky shimmered with gold, and the air carried music too soft to be heard, but always felt. The souls who dwelled there were young again and strong, their faces unlined, their limbs unwearied. They did not wander as the shades of asphodel did. They feasted and hunted and sang. Heroes met one another in eternal embrace. Poets recited verses that never faded. Warriors rode horses that never tired. There was no night, no hunger, no grief. It was not reward for wealth nor lineage. It was reward for the spirit, for the courage of the heart, and the dignity of the soul. At times, the judges of the dead sent a soul there without hesitation. At other times, they deliberated long, and in the end, denied. The journey to Elysium was not one a soul could take alone. It was granted. And for those who reached it, there was no need for Lethe. They remembered everything, and nothing in their memory brought sorrow. Some said that a soul who reached Elysium 3 times through 3 lives might one day ascend beyond all lands and dwell among the gods themselves on the Isles of the Blessed. But few did. Most who entered Elysium remained content. They had passed through life and through judgment, and had arrived in a place where time did not wound, and where the sun never failed. Thus the kingdom of Hades revealed its many faces. Beneath all was Tartarus, where rebellion ended and justice endured. Above it stretched Asphodel, where the quiet dead drifted like wind across pale fields. And beyond, shining like a lantern at the end of the world, lay Elysium, the resting place of the righteous. These were the lands over which Hades ruled with silence and certainty, with the gaze of a god who did not forget, and with the patience of stone. His kingdom did not shift with the tide or break with the storm. It held firm beneath the earth, waiting for every soul who would someday come to it. In the high halls of Olympus, where gold shone beneath the clouds and ambrosia passed from hand to hand among the immortals, there sat a throne that remained forever vacant. It was not out of rebellion nor exile that its master kept away. It was because the realm he ruled demanded his full and undivided presence. While Zeus lifted his scepter over the living and Poseidon stirred the ocean depths with his trident, their elder brother Hades remained below, unseen and uninvited. Not because he lacked power, but because the place he governed lay in the realm beneath remembrance. His was a kingdom vast and ancient, a dominion not built upon conquest or devotion, but upon the unchanging truth that all living things, sooner or later, must come to him. Hades was not a god of cruelty, nor a lord who delighted in agony. He did not rage as Ares did, nor scheme as Hermes did, nor seduce as Apollo did. He was the most solemn of the brothers, the most enduring, the most unyielding. His visage was stern and his presence still. He did not chase war or revelry or the affection of mortals. He did not stride across battlefields or breathe storms across the sea. He sat in the deep, surrounded by stone and shadow, and held dominion over the end of every tale. His realm was one that could not be avoided and could not be resisted. All men who drew breath owed him a debt, and when that debt came due, they were gathered to his halls without exception or delay. Though he was called God of the Underworld, Hades was also called the god of what lies beneath. The riches of the world, whether they be gold or silver, or the harvest pulled from the soil, belonged to him. For all things that came from the earth passed through his domain. Some among the Greeks began to call him Pluton, the giver of wealth, for even the grain that fed the cities owed its existence to the soil that answered to his name. Yet Hades did not smile upon temples nor seek prayers. His worship was quiet, his rites solemn, his shrines tucked into caverns or buried in groves no light could reach. Men did not raise statues to him in the city squares. They buried offerings in the ground and spoke his name with averted eyes, for his presence stirred something old and cold in the hearts of the living. In the palace of the underworld, carved from the black rock of the world's bones, Hades ruled with order and precision. His throne stood upon a dais of obsidian, his fingers wrapped around a scepter crowned with a bird of prey. Upon his brow sat no crown of gold, but a circlet of iron, dark and heavy and unadorned. At his side hung a key forged in the beginning of time, the master of every lock in the land of the dead. It was said that once a soul passed the gates into his kingdom, the key would turn behind them and seal the door, and not even the gods could unfasten it without Hades' will. His helm of darkness, gifted to him by the Cyclopes in the time before the war with the Titans, granted him invisibility not only to mortal eyes, but to the very awareness of the world. With it, he could walk unmarked among gods and men alike, unseen and unknown, for the presence of death is always near and always hidden. He was called Polydegmon, receiver of many, for his halls never emptied and his gates never closed. The flow of souls into his realm was endless and without distinction. Kings and slaves, warriors and children, shepherds and tyrants, all stood equal before his throne. He asked no tribute of the living and offered no pardon to the dead. His justice was not vengeance, and his laws were not mercy. They were final and absolute. He did not take life, nor did he shorten it. He only received what had been claimed by time or fate or the careless hand of man. And though he did not walk among the Olympians, though he kept no court in the clouds and did not hurl thunderbolts or stir the oceans into tempests, his brothers knew that his power was as great as theirs, if not greater. For while Zeus ruled the sky and Poseidon ruled the sea, Hades ruled the rest. Every burial, every tomb, every coin placed on the tongue of the dead was an offering to his realm. Every field ploughed and every seed planted whispered his name beneath the soil. His silence was heavier than their voices, and his absence was more constant than their presence. So he ruled, not with passion or fury, but with certainty. He did not strike down, nor lift up. He received. And in the heart of the underworld, where the rivers whispered and the shadows lingered, Hades kept his watch upon the fates of all things. No crown was more secure, no throne was more still, and no kingdom was more enduring. Long before her name echoed through the marble halls of mystery cults, and long before poets whispered of her in the breathless hush between spring and autumn, Persephone walked beneath the open sky, a daughter of warmth and light. She was born of Demeter, the goddess of grain and growth, and her earliest days were spent among meadows thick with wildflowers and trees heavy with fruit, where bees hummed through the air and streams played over polished stone. In those early seasons of the world, Persephone knew nothing of sorrow. She danced where the grass rose soft beneath her bare feet, and the scent of blossoms followed her wherever she passed. Among the immortals, she was called Kor, the maiden, untouched by time and free of care, beloved by her mother and by the sun that watched her wander through the golden hours. Yet far below those bright meadows, in the deep halls of the dead, Hades sat upon his throne and watched. He did not envy the world above, nor did he pine for its pleasures, but he saw Persephone and knew her name, and the thought of her lingered in the stillness of his kingdom. In his solitude, he desired a queen, not to warm his throne or sing his praises, but to share in the eternity of his dominion. Some say he went to Zeus and asked for the maiden's hand, and that the king of the gods, calculating as ever, gave his brother silent consent. Others say Hades acted alone, driven not by love, but by something older and more primal, a sense that Persephone belonged as much to death as to life, that the flower that bloomed must one day fall. One day, as Persephone wandered alone in a field beyond the sight of her companions, her hands full of crocus and hyacinth and violets wet with dew, the earth beneath her feet began to tremble. A sound rose from below like a groan pressed through stone, and the soil cracked open into a chasm that widened with terrible grace. From the depths came a chariot pulled by horses darker than the night and swifter than the wind. Hades stood in its shadow, crowned and silent, and with a single outstretched hand, he seized her. There was no cry loud enough to reach Olympus, and the flowers fell from her grasp as the chasm closed again and sealed her fate. The meadow returned to silence, but the world had changed. Demeter searched the earth with the desperation of a goddess who had lost the one thing she had never feared to lose. She wandered with a burning torch through cities and fields, across mountains and over oceans, refusing rest and shunning the company of gods and men alike. For days that stretched into months, she sought her daughter, and in her grief she turned her face from the world. Crops withered. Trees bore no fruit. The rivers ran thin and the soil cracked beneath the hooves of cattle. Mankind, starving and confused, cried out for mercy, but no answer came from the fields. The earth itself mourned with Demeter, for it too had loved Kor and now felt the emptiness of her absence. At last, the truth was brought to light. Demeter learned that Hades had taken her daughter to the underworld and that Zeus had permitted it to happen without her knowledge. Her grief turned to fury, and she climbed to the heights of Olympus with words sharp as frost, demanding that Persephone be returned at once. Zeus, faced with famine spreading across the mortal world and the withering of all things born of earth, yielded to her wrath. He sent Hermes, swift-footed and golden-tongued, down into the kingdom of the dead to carry the message. Persephone was to be freed and brought back to her mother, and the earth would be restored. But Hades, cunning and solemn, did not forbid her return. Instead, he invited Persephone to sit beside him one last time in his palace of stone. He offered her a bowl of seeds from the pomegranate, a fruit that glowed like rubies in the gloom. She took them and ate. Some say she consumed 3 seeds, others say 6, but however many passed her lips, they bound her. For all who eat of the food of the dead are claimed by the realm of Hades, and though they may walk again beneath the sky, a part of them always remains below. When Hermes arrived, Persephone rose and followed him. She returned to the world of sun and sky, to the arms of her mother and the songs of birds. But she was no longer Kor. she had seen the land beneath the roots of the mountains, had walked among the asphodel, and tasted the silence of the tomb. Her eyes no longer held only innocence, and her step bore the weight of knowledge that could not be unlearned. Demeter rejoiced, and the earth flourished in her joy. The fields turned green once more. The wheat ripened in the sun. The vines bore fruit, and the orchards sighed beneath their burden. But even in her gladness, Demeter knew the bargain was incomplete. Persephone had eaten the food of the underworld and could not remain above forever. And so, an agreement was struck, ancient and binding. For part of the year, Persephone would dwell with her mother, bringing spring and harvest to the land. For the rest, she would descend once more into the halls of Hades and take her place beside the god who had claimed her. When she rose, the world blossomed. When she fell, it withered. The cycle turned and returned, and the seasons took their rhythm from her footsteps. In time, Persephone ceased to be a child of meadows and became a queen in her own right. She ruled beside Hades, not in silence, but with a voice that commanded gods and shades alike. Her name was spoken in the sacred rites of Eleusis. Her face was painted on urns and carved into marble. She was the daughter of Demeter and the wife of Hades, the maiden and the sovereign, the bringer of life and the guardian of death. She walked the underworld not as a prisoner, but as a judge, and even the Furies bowed their heads when she passed. Her presence brought balance to the realm. Where Hades ruled through law, Persephone ruled through memory. She remembered the living and honored the dead. She knew the sorrow of parting and the weight of reunion. In her eyes, the dead found comfort. In her silence, the living found cause to grieve. And so Persephone reigned, crowned not with gold, but with a wreath of asphodel and poppy, her throne carved beside her husband's in the deepest hall of the world. Hers was a realm of twilight and return, of sorrow and grace, and though she would always walk between two worlds, she belonged to both completely. She was queen of the underworld, and all who passed into its shadows would come beneath her gaze. There comes a moment, quiet and final, when the thread of life unravels, and the breath that once stirred a chest falls silent. It does not always come with pain or thunder or light, but when it arrives, it is absolute. No force in the world can halt it or reverse it. The eyes dim, the limbs stiffen, the warmth retreats into the earth, and the soul, light as air and nearly formless, slips free from its shell. That moment begins the journey that every mortal must take. A path older than the memory of mankind and trodden by every ancestor, every forgotten soldier, every lost mother, every child who never reached his second season. Death is not the end of the story, but the beginning of another one, and it begins with a guide who never tires. Hermes, among the most versatile of the gods, holds many titles. He is the herald of Olympus, the bringer of messages and dreams, the patron of thieves and merchants, but none of his aspects is more ancient nor more constant than that of Psychopompos, the guide of souls. When a man dies, whether upon a field of war or in the solitude of his bed, Hermes is there. He does not arrive in haste nor in delay, but always in time, and he comes not in splendor nor with music, but in stillness. With winged sandals and a staff that marks his divine office, he appears at the threshold between breath and silence, and he takes the soul into his keeping without command and without explanation. The journey he leads is downward, though the path is not always clear. The soul no longer sees as it once did. It perceives the world like a reflection in rippling water, the living realm growing more distant with every step. Hermes walks beside it, neither speaking nor rushing, for the dead are no longer bound by the pace of life. Through caverns and hollows unseen by mortal eyes, past the roots of mountains and under the bones of forgotten giants, he leads them to the shore that marks the first true boundary between worlds. There, where the world of the living ends and the realm of the dead begins, flows the river Acheron. Its waters are dark and sluggish, wide enough to drown a city, and the air around it hums with the low wailing of those who have not yet crossed. No birds sing here, no wind moves the reeds. The only sound is the lapping of water and the murmuring of voices as countless shades gather at the banks and wait. These are the dead who have been properly buried, whose bodies were tended with care, whose eyes were closed, and whose mouths held the copper coin that would pay their passage. Among them walk the unburied, the forgotten, those who died in foreign lands, or whose remains were lost to storm and beast. These souls remain restless. They cry out to be remembered, to be seen. They plead for burial, for the rituals that would free them from this shore, for without them, they cannot cross. At the water's edge stands the ferryman. Charon, ancient and implacable, has served longer than memory. His face is hollow, his skin the color of old bark, and his robes are threadbare from centuries of river spray. In his gnarled hands, he holds a pole worn smooth by the grip of uncounted voyages. He does not speak unless he must, and when he speaks, his voice is the scrape of stone against stone. His eyes pierce the shades who approach, and he reaches out his hand, palm upward. If a coin is given, he nods. If none is found, he turns away. Those who are accepted step onto his boat, a vessel narrow and long, carved from blackened wood that bears no scent. It creaks, but never sinks, and its passage makes no wake. As the ferry glides across the water, the living world fades completely. The mist thickens. The sky disappears. The silence deepens. No soul speaks during the crossing. No sound is heard save the dipping of the pole and the slow slither of water against the hull. When they reach the far bank, Charon does not bid farewell. He gestures. The souls disembark, their feet touching the ashen soil of Hades' realm for the first time. The river behind them flows on, and the boat returns for the next. Charon does not rest. He has never rested. Those who could not pay remain behind. They wander the shores, pleading with Hermes, crying to the skies, begging the wind. They cannot cross until rites are made, until their names are spoken, and their bodies laid to rest. They dwell in a kind of limbo, tasting neither the peace of Asphodel nor the justice of Tartarus. Their eyes are wide, and their voices are low, and they gather like mist that never rises. The threshold of the underworld is not a gate of stone. It is not marked by pillars or watched by armies. It is a river, ancient and deep, and once it has been crossed, the soul belongs no longer to the world above. Hermes does not linger once his charge is delivered. He returns the way he came, unseen and unthanked, ready to escort the next. And Charon, standing by the shore, waits again. Thus begins the passage, not with fire, not with fanfare, but with a coin, a river, and the soft, steady sound of the oar. The living are left behind. The journey into Hades begins. Once the soul has crossed the river and set foot upon the soil of Hades, the way back becomes closed forever. No road leads again to the upper world. The air is heavy and unmoving, and the shadows deepen with every step. The silence is not empty, but listening, and in the silence there is law. The soul may not wander where it pleases. There is order here, old and unspoken, etched into the stones and breathed out from the bones of the earth itself. That order is guarded, not by soldiers in armor, nor by laws written upon parchment, but by creatures whose very nature embodies the purpose of the realm they serve. The first of these stands at the gates. Cerberus, born of ancient monsters in the forgotten epochs before the age of men, keeps his place with an unwavering gaze and the restless stillness of a storm that waits. He is a hound beyond reckoning, monstrous in shape and terrible in presence, his body broad as a bull's and bristling with fur coarse as iron. His 3 heads do not bark, but growl low and constant, a sound that trembles through the stone beneath the feet of those who approach. His eyes burn with a red glow, and his breath is thick with the heat of the underworld. From each neck rises a head with teeth like broken swords and jaws strong enough to break a man in half with a single bite. Snakes wind around his shoulders and spine, their tongues flickering with a restless hunger, and from the base of his spine slithers a tail that coils and strikes with the venom of ancient serpents. Cerberus does not speak. He does not question. He does not sleep. He watches the souls who arrive, and he lets them pass into the depths, for none may escape again. His duty is not to turn away the dead, but to hold them in. He ensures that no soul flees the halls of Hades, and that no living creature enters without permission. His growl is the last sound a trespasser hears. His bite is the punishment for those who believe the laws of the underworld can be defied. Those who have seen him and lived are few, and the tales they tell are shrouded in fear. Some say his fur drips blood even when he is calm. Others say his heads can speak in voices that echo with the cries of the damned. But no one disputes that he is loyal only to Hades and Persephone, and that no command may turn him from his post. Even the gods do not pass him lightly. He is not a creature of rage, but of duty, and that duty is eternal. His place is fixed, and his vigilance is endless. He is the threshold made flesh, and no soul may pass where Cerberus stands unless fate has already granted passage. Yet beyond the gate, past the shadow of the great hound's watchful eyes, walk others who guard the deeper laws of this place. They do not pace the stones like beasts, but move through the gloom like wind through forgotten leaves. They are the Erinyes, whom the poets called the Furies, and their names are old even among the gods. Alecto, Tisiphone, and Megaera, daughters of the blood shed at the birth of time, dwell within the underworld not as prisoners nor servants, but as avengers and enforcers. They are vengeance given voice, punishment given form, and justice made eternal. The Erinyes are not beautiful in the way that inspires longing, nor hideous in the way that invites mockery. Their presence is a wound in the air. Their faces are marked by fury and grief, their eyes black with memory, and from their heads coil serpents in place of hair. Their garments are soaked with the curses of the murdered and the betrayed, and they carry scourges woven from the tendons of the damned. Their voices ring like bronze and split the silence when they name the guilty. Their wings, vast and feathered with shadows, lift them over the fields of asphodel and into the depths of Tartarus. They know every name that was cursed in death and every oath that was broken in life. When a soul enters Hades, carrying the weight of a crime unpunished, it is the Erinyes who come to meet it. They do not question, they do not reason, they remember. Their pursuit is relentless, and their judgment does not wait. Even among the dead, there are debts to be paid. The murderer who walked free among the living is dragged through the dust, and brought to face the full measure of his guilt. The oathbreaker who smiled in temples and lied before altars is laid bare. The betrayer who fed falsehood to kin or turned away from sacred duty finds no shelter. The Erinyes do not rest and do not forget. Time does not lessen their fury. The passing of centuries only strengthens their resolve. They do not serve Hades in the way a soldier serves a king. They act within his realm, but are bound to laws even older than his throne. They are the enforcers of cosmic balance, and their allegiance is to justice itself, the kind that predates civilization and religion, the kind that rises from the very bones of the world. Even Hades does not command them. He respects their work and honors their purpose. And when they come to his court with a soul in their grasp, he listens and he allows them to pass. No petition softens them. No prayer delays them. The guilty are taken. The innocent are untouched. Together, Cerberus and the Erinyes stand at the edges of Hades' power, two forces made to guard what must be guarded and to punish what must not be allowed to pass unnoticed. They are not brothers, nor are they allies in arms, but each performs a duty that shapes the structure of the realm. Cerberus ensures that the border between death and life remains intact. The Erinyes ensure that no crime, whether of blood or vow, escapes judgment. The one watches the gate. The others walk the corridors of guilt and memory. And so, once the soul has crossed the river and passed through the gates, it does so under the watch of these eternal sentinels. There is no escape. There is no concealment. There is only the beginning of the reckoning. In the land of the dead, justice wears many faces. Some are silent, some are monstrous, some are as old as night itself. Beneath the vaults of the underworld, past the rivers that mark the end of breath and the guardians who watch the gate, there lies a great and silent hall. Its roof is carved from stone older than mountains, and its pillars rise from the bones of the earth itself. There are no banners in this hall, no music nor golden torches, only the hush of dust and the steady echo of footsteps long faded. It is here that every soul must come after crossing the river, and it is here that the reckoning begins. Before any shade may pass into Asphodel, or be cast down into Tartarus, or lifted into the meadows of Elysium, it must stand in the presence of the judges. These are not kings of men, nor gods of war, but ancient rulers whose wisdom was proven in life, and whose justice endures in death. They are Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, and they do not forget. The souls of the dead do not choose where they will dwell. That choice was made by the way they lived. They carry with them not gold, nor weapons, nor relics of the world they have left behind, but the truth of their deeds, and before the judges, nothing is hidden. There is no advocate, there is no plea. There is only the record of what the soul has done, spoken aloud not by scribe or herald, but by the very breath of the underworld, which remembers every oath sworn, every wound given, every kindness offered, and every betrayal performed. In that vast hall, the truth is not a thing argued or weighed in speech. It rises from the soul itself, unveiled and undeniable. Aeacus, who in life ruled the island of Aegina, and was famed among mortals for his strict but fair rule, now keeps the keys to the very gates of Hades. He is the first to receive the dead, his eyes heavy with the long patience of centuries, his judgment swift and clear. He hears the stories of those who once walked beneath the sun, and he listens with a silence that presses down like the weight of stone. He asks no questions, for the dead cannot lie, and their fates are already bound in the thread of what they chose to do when breath still moved through their chests. When he speaks, His voice is the voice of ancient laws, and the doors behind him open or close according to his will. Rhadamanthus, the second of the three, ruled Crete in the age before memory, and even in life his name was spoken with reverence and dread. In the underworld, he is given the souls of those who came from the lands of the East, and it is he who weighs their merit and their shame. He is said to be the most unbending of the three, for he does not temper justice with pity. Where others may forgive the weakness of the flesh, Rhadamanthus considers only the intention and the consequence. Those who spoke truth in darkness, who held to honor when no one watched, find favor in his gaze. Those who sinned in secrecy or wore virtue as a mask are revealed for what they were. It is he who directs the righteous to Elysium, and those who earn his nod are carried away on the breeze that leads to the fields of the blessed. Last is Minos, once the king of all Crete, who received the laws of the gods and bound his people to order with chains of fairness and command. In death, he sits at the center of the hall, the final judge whose decision binds the fate of every soul. He does not speak first, but always speaks last. Where Aeacus holds the keys and Rhadamanthus casts the first verdict, Minos listens to both and brings their judgments to a single end. He is the one who considers when the other two disagree, and it is his word that echoes through the hall and sends the dead to the place prepared for them. The poet said that he sat with a golden scepter in his hand, and that when he lifted it, the wind itself fell still. The three judges do not argue. They do not deliberate in whispers. Their roles are carved as deeply into the underworld as the rivers and the halls. Each soul that comes before them is measured without delay and without favor. It does not matter if the soul belonged to a king or a beggar, a priest or a thief. The same silence greets them all. The same cold floor receives their footsteps. The same gaze watches them until their truth is spoken. There are no second chances in this court. The judges are not cruel, but they are complete. Those who are good are rewarded, and those who are wicked are cast down. But many fall into neither fate. These are the multitudes whose lives were small and quiet, whose deeds were balanced between sin and grace, whose days were spent in toil without great betrayal or great sacrifice. These souls are sent to the asphodel fields, where they walk among the pale flowers and remember only fragments of their lives. There is no torment there, and no celebration, only the slow forgetting and the soft murmur of what once was. In rare moments, a soul will come before the judges bearing the weight of heroism. These are the few whose names are remembered not only in tombs, but in the voices of men. If the soul has lived 3 such lives, each one pure and noble and proven, the judges may grant it passage beyond even Elysium, to the Isles of the Blessed, where the winds never bite, and the sea sings without sorrow. But such souls are rare, and even the judges seldom name them. Thus judgment is passed in the underworld, not with fire and thunder, but with silence and truth. The 3 judges sit eternal, their faces unmoved, their words unchallenged. They do not grow weary. They do not forget. They are the law of death made visible, and in their presence, every soul comes to know exactly what it was and what it has earned. Beyond the court of the judges, beyond the drifting meadows and the fields where the ordinary dead sleep beneath the asphodel, there lies a realm deeper and older, darker than the rest of Hades' kingdom, carved out of fear and sealed by the hands of the gods themselves. It is a place no soul enters by accident and no soul leaves in peace. It lies beneath the floor of the underworld, so far removed from the world above that it may as well be beneath existence itself. The poets called it Tartarus, and they spoke of it with trembling voices. For in Tartarus the worst of fates are meted out, and time does not soften the agony it holds. Tartarus was not built. It was not planned. It came into being at the same hour as the world's first breath. The gods did not create it, but when they looked down into its blackness, they knew it must serve a purpose. When the war of the gods had ended and the titans were cast from the sky and the mountains, their chained bodies were thrown into this pit, and there they fell for 9 days and 9 nights before reaching the bottom. There they remain, locked behind walls of bronze and encircled by the river Phlegethon, whose flames neither consume nor fade. The Cyclopes and the 100-handed giants were once held here too, until Zeus freed them in exchange for weapons to turn against Cronus. But the Titans who rose against the Olympians were never freed. They lie beneath the weight of heaven, their strength broken, and their names remembered only in warning. Yet Tartarus is not a prison only for fallen immortals. It is the final destination of mortal souls who defied not merely men or kings, but the very will of the gods. The judges of the underworld send them there when their crimes have torn too deep a wound in the world to be allowed rest. These are not sinners in the petty ways of men. They are murderers of kin, betrayers of sacred law, mockers of the divine order. Their names are few, but their stories are carved into the foundations of myth, told and retold so that others might tremble. Among the most infamous is Sisyphus, once king of Corinth, whose cleverness knew no equal and whose arrogance reached even into the realm of the dead. In life, he broke the laws of hospitality and betrayed the trust of the gods. He tricked Thanatos, the very embodiment of death, and bound him in chains so that no man could die. For a time the world was full of suffering without release, and when death was finally freed, Sisyphus tricked him again, persuading Persephone to allow him return to the land of the living by feigning remorse and pleading unfinished rites. When the truth was uncovered, the gods had no more patience. In Tartarus, he was given a stone the size of a chariot, and he was commanded to roll it up a steep slope. The path was long and the labor endless. Each time he neared the summit, the stone slipped from his hands and fell again to the foot of the hill. And so he labors still, never finishing, never resting, the weight of his deceit bearing down on his shoulders for all eternity. Beside him suffers Tantalus, once welcomed at the table of the gods, a son of Zeus who betrayed that trust in the vilest way. He stole ambrosia and nectar from Olympus to share with mortals. In another telling, he served the flesh of his own son at a feast to test the knowledge of the gods. His crimes, whichever form they took, were met with a punishment that mirrors his offense. He stands in a pool of clear water, his thirst gnawing at him, and whenever he stoops to drink, the water recedes beyond his lips. Above him hangs a branch heavy with fruit, ripe and golden, but whenever he reaches upward, the wind lifts the bough out of reach. His hunger and thirst are never eased. He is forever close to relief, and forever denied it. The gods he once mocked now watch as he suffers the craving he caused in others. Then there is Ixion, the first murderer of kin, and the first man ever to kill a family member and escape mortal punishment. Zeus, pitying him, brought him to Olympus to offer redemption. But Ixion, unrepentant and ambitious, cast his eyes upon Hera and sought to seduce the queen of the gods herself. Zeus, perceiving the insult, created a phantom in Hera's likeness, and Ixion, fooled by it, proved the depth of his depravity. For this offense, he was bound to a wheel of fire which spins without end through the skies of the underworld. His arms and legs, are stretched across the turning spokes, and his screams echo in circles that never break. He is the image of betrayal and madness, condemned to whirl through flame without sleep or stillness. Titius, too, lies in Tartarus, a giant whose lust led him to assault the goddess Leto. For this outrage, he was cast down and stretched across the floor of the pit. His body spans acres, his arms pinned wide, and upon his chest 2 vultures descend each day to feed upon his liver. The organ grows back with each night's darkness, and each morning the vultures return. His agony is as endless as his crime was unforgivable, and there is no sound in Tartarus louder than the tearing of his flesh and the rustle of wings. In another corner of this abyss stand the Danaids, the 50 daughters of Danaus, who were wed to the 50 sons of Aegyptus. All but one, following the command of their father, slew their husbands on the night of their wedding. For this mass betrayal of oaths and blood, they are condemned to carry water in jars that are riddled with holes. They walk endlessly to the well, fill their vessels, and return, only to find them empty once more. Their labor never ends. Their guilt is carved into every drop that spills through their fingers. Many others suffer here, their names less known but their punishments equally eternal. Some are stretched on racks of shadow and bone. Others are hunted through the dark by beasts that never tire. A few stand in silence, their tongues torn from their mouths, unable to speak the lies they once spread. Each punishment fits the crime with a cruel precision, not devised in malice, but in justice so ancient it has grown hard as iron and cold as stone. There is no mercy in Tartarus, only balance. Every betrayal, every murder, every outrage against the sacred finds its answer here. The Erinyes, whose wings cut the air like blades, watch over these punishments. They strike when guilt grows too silent, when a soul dares to forget what it has done. Their whips are always ready, their voices always near. They do not forgive, they do not relent. They exist to see that nothing is forgotten and that no evil sleeps peacefully. Tartarus is not chaos. It is order carried to its farthest end. It is the mirror of Olympus, dark where the heavens are bright, still where the mountains are loud, cold where the sun is warm. It is the place where the worst parts of the world are buried and watched so that the rest of the world may continue. And so it remains, below all things, sealed in shadow, deep as fear, guarded by flame and silence. The titans lie chained, the sinners suffer, the gods look away, but Tartarus waits forever. Beyond the chasm of Tartarus, and far from the golden meadows of Elysium, stretching across the middle reaches of Hades' domain, lies a land neither cursed nor blessed, neither crowned in suffering nor lit by glory. It is the great plain of the dead, the place where most souls dwell after judgment, not because they were wicked, nor because they were worthy, but because they simply lived and died and left behind no deed bright enough to shine, or dark enough to burn. The poets called this realm the Asphodel Fields, and in that name they captured both its strangeness and its sorrow, for it is named after the flower that grows there in endless silence, pale and rootless, its petals thick with the scent of forgetfulness. The Asphodel Fields do not blaze with torment, nor shimmer with divine reward. They spread across the underworld in a haze of grey and dust, flat and featureless as far as the eye can see, a country of still air and dim skies, where no sun rises and no night ever falls. There is no wind in that place, and no song. The sky above is the colour of ash, and the earth beneath is dry and brittle beneath the feet of shades who no longer feel the pressure of weight or warmth. It is a realm without seasons, where time passes like a dream half remembered, always slipping away before it can be named. Here dwell the countless souls who in life tilled the earth, sailed the seas, bore children, traded goods, built homes, spun wool, and walked in the ordinary light of ordinary days. They committed no crimes against the gods. They built no altars in their own honor. They spoke truth when it was asked of them and kept their heads bowed before the sacred things. But they left behind no fire to mark them and no blood-stained sin to drag them into darkness. When they stood before the judges of the dead, their hearts weighed neither heavily nor lightly. Their fates were measured in balance, and in balance they were sent here to the fields of asphodel, where the dead neither rejoice nor suffer, but simply exist. The shades in asphodel walk slowly and speak rarely. They move in great gatherings, yet no community binds them. They do not know one another, though some may pass a familiar soul and pause, as if remembering a face from far away. The memories they carried from life are pale now, dim as the light above their heads, and they drift like leaves caught in a slow-moving stream, touching for a moment, then parting without direction. There are no cities in asphodel, no homes or halls or hearths. There is only the wide and empty plain, and the endless carpet of white flowers that bloom without colour or scent. The souls here do not weep. They do not laugh. They murmur. Their voices are thin and hollow, like wind through reeds or dry leaves blown across stone. When a new soul arrives, there may be a flicker of curiosity, a movement toward the fresh arrival, but the interest fades quickly. The dead grow quiet over time. Their names fall from them like ash. Their faces grow smooth and indistinct. Even their languages begin to crumble, until all that remains are fragments of sound and gesture that mean nothing to anyone but the ghosts who speak them. Yet even here, in the stillness and the forgetting, there are moments of memory. Sometimes a soul will cry out a name it once knew. Sometimes the sound of a lyre will drift faintly across the plain, carried by the windless air. Sometimes a figure will stand motionless and whisper an old prayer, the words formed out of habit more than hope. These echoes fade, but they remind the underworld that once these shades lived, and once they mattered, if only to themselves and to the gods who judged them. The river Lethe runs near the edges of asphodel, its pale waters curling like mist through the flowers. Many come to it and drink, and in drinking, they let go of the last pieces of the world above. They forget their names, their children, the shape of their homes, the sound of the sea, the warmth of the sun. They forget what it meant to be alive, and they become still. Others resist the water, standing on its banks in silence, staring into its depths as though searching for some reason to hold on. Some succeed, others give in. But whether they drink or do not, the end is the same. All souls in asphodel slow with time. They forget joy, they forget sorrow. They become part of the field, another voice in the hum of the dead. This was the fate the Greeks believed awaited most men and women. Not torment, not reward, but a quiet and endless fading. The afterlife held no great promise for those who were merely good or merely bad. It offered only stillness. To the ancients, this was not cruelty, it was balance, it was the way of things. The soul came to rest, and in resting became dust again, no longer a story, no longer a name, but something older and quieter than either. And so the asphodel fields remain, untouched by time and undisturbed by war or storm. The dead gather there in numbers beyond counting. They walk, they pause, they drift. Above them stretches the dim sky. Beneath them bloom the white flowers. Around them moves the whisper of 1,000 forgotten dreams. There exists, far from the gloom and forgetfulness of asphodel, a place of light that does not burn, and music that does not fade. It lies beyond the rivers of grief and beyond the reach of the iron laws that hold most souls in silence. The judges speak of it rarely, and those who walk its fields are few. Yet it is said that among the plains of the dead, tucked into a fold of Hades' vast dominion, there lies a realm where the air carries no sorrow and where the earth remembers the warmth of the sun. The Greeks called it Elysium, the Elysian fields, the place where the righteous go after death, not to be judged again, not to fade into shadow, but to dwell in peace and splendor, untouched by decay, in eternal reward for a life lived well. This was not a realm built for kings or for conquerors. It was not filled with gold, nor guarded by spears. It was not promised to those born of noble blood, nor to those who carried famous names. Elysium was reserved for those whose hearts had walked in step with justice, whose hands had not grasped too greedily, whose words had not wounded without cause. It was granted by the favor of the gods and the verdict of the judges, and it welcomed poets who had sung with truth, warriors who had fought with honor, rulers who had judged with mercy, and mortals who had borne their burdens without cruelty or corruption. The passage to Elysium was not loud. It was granted with the lift of a hand or the silent nod of Minos, and the soul that was chosen would find itself carried away by a soft wind, leaving the grey fields of asphodel far behind. In the old stories, Elysium was not always placed beneath the world. Some believed it to lie at the edge of the earth, where the setting sun kissed the western sea, and the air was always stirred by gentle breeze. Others said it was a secret garden hidden within the underworld, a pocket of light protected from sorrow, where the seasons never turned and the sky remained always golden. Still others believed that the souls who reached Elysium were born anew into lives of peace and then returned again, and that those who reached it 3 times would be sent finally to the Isles of the Blessed, a paradise even beyond paradise, where the gods themselves might walk in quiet companionship with the most favored of the dead. The Elysian fields are not paved with fire or shadow. They are meadows that stretch into the distance, filled with flowers that never wither and streams that never run dry. The trees are always green. The sky above is blue and pale gold, neither burning with heat nor chilled by wind. The air smells of honey and morning rain, and the ground is soft beneath the feet of those who walk it. The dead in Elysium are not shades. They do not murmur or drift. They are strong and young again. They do not forget who they were. They remember everything, and the memory does not wound them. They greet one another by name, embrace as friends and kindred, and speak not of what they have lost, but of what they still have. There is no labor in Elysium, but there is no idleness either. The souls there pursue what brought them joy in life. Some hunt across the endless plains, their dogs running beside them. Some sit beside streams and play upon golden lyres. Some walk among the groves and recite old poems or speak the names of those they once loved, their voices ringing like chimes in the breeze. There is feasting, but no hunger. There is song, but no silence. Time moves, but it does not steal. The souls who dwell there do not fade. They endure, not as kings upon thrones or gods upon heights, but as men and women who have been given the rarest of gifts, a place to rest with dignity and without fear. Those who reach Elysium are honored, not because they were perfect, but because they lived with purpose and left no wound upon the world that could not be healed. Their reward is not glory, but peace. Their eternity is not one of conquest, but of beauty preserved. In the tales whispered by the priests of Eleusis, it was said that Persephone herself sometimes walked through Elysium, not as queen or judge, but as a silent companion, and that the souls bowed not from fear, but from reverence. For they knew it was by her grace they had passed from death into blessing. And beyond Elysium, far beyond even the whisper of Lethe and the echo of memory, there is one more place spoken of in riddles and dreams. The Isles of the Blessed lie across the sea no ship can cross, in the west beyond the reach of storm and shadow. Only those who have lived 3 lives of virtue, each judged worthy by the sons of Zeus, are sent there. Few ever find it. Fewer still speak of it. But the poets say that on those isles, the grass is silver beneath the moonlight and gold beneath the sun. The trees bend with fruit that never rots. The waves sing and the stars shine even in the noonday sky. There, death itself sleeps, and the souls who dwell there walk without memory of pain, beyond judgment and beyond the reach of time. Thus does the underworld contain, hidden within its darkness, this realm of light. Elysium is not large, and it does not welcome many, but it stands as proof that the gods do not forget the righteous, and that justice, when perfectly measured, holds a reward deeper than wealth and older than renown. The path to it is narrow, and the gates are watched by judges who do not weep. But for those few who are found worthy, there is no sweeter wind than the one that carries them into the golden meadows, no finer sound than the songs of the dead who remember joy, and no greater peace than to dwell forever beneath the gentle sky where all good things are preserved. Among all the tales that reach us from the age before memory, when gods still walked among mortals and the veil between life and death had not yet hardened to stone, there is none more tender and more cruel than the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. It is a tale whispered wherever men grieve, wherever love lingers too long in the arms of loss, wherever song rises to defy silence. It is the tale of a man who sought to bring back the dead and nearly did, a man who sang before the throne of death and made even the unfeeling weep, only to be undone not by monsters or by gods, but by the most fragile thread of all, hope. Orpheus was the son of Calliope, the eldest of the Muses, and his voice carried the music of the heavens and the weight of the earth. He could calm the winds and bend the trees. When he plucked the strings of his lyre, rivers forgot to flow and birds forgot to fly. The wild beasts of the forest came to rest at his feet, and even the hard-hearted gods paused to listen. His fame reached every corner of the world, but he cared little for glory. His heart belonged to one alone, and her name was Eurydice. She was not born of thunder or crowned in stars. She was a daughter of the green fields, a child of warm mornings and quiet meadows, a mortal woman whose eyes held the promise of spring and whose smile silenced the noise of the world. Their love was not forged in war or bound by prophecy. It grew in secret and in joy, like ivy climbing a forgotten wall. When they walked together, the grass turned soft beneath their feet. When they spoke, the air listened. The world, for a time, seemed content to let them be happy. But the world is not kind to such love. It endures, but it does not protect. One morning, as Eurydice wandered through the woods alone, she stepped into the path of a serpent. The fang pierced her skin, and the venom filled her blood with cold. She cried out once and fell, and the flowers around her bent low in mourning. When Orpheus found her, she was already gone. Her body was still, and her soul had begun its journey to the land beneath. No cry he made could call her back. No song could wake her. The living could not follow the dead, and the dead do not return. Orpheus wept until the ground was soaked, and his lyre grew silent beneath his trembling fingers. Then, Without warning or prayer, he rose and began to walk. He did not go to the priests or to the temples. He did not seek counsel from kings or wisdom from the old. He walked to the edge of the world and found the mouth of the underworld itself. No mortal had descended by choice. No living soul had passed into that realm and returned whole. But Orpheus did not hesitate. He stepped into the darkness, his lyre slung across his back, his hands steady, his heart ablaze with sorrow that had turned to purpose. Cerberus, whose 3 heads had torn intruders limb from limb and whose bark silenced even heroes, lay down upon the stones and closed its eyes, lulled into sleep by the soft chords of the lyre and the low hum of morning that filled the hall. When at last Orpheus came to the throne of Hades, he did not kneel and he did not demand. He stood as he was, a man broken by grief and remade by love, and he began to sing. He sang not with power, but with truth. He told the story of Eurydice, not of her beauty, but of her laughter, not of her death, but of the way she once brushed her hand across his shoulder when the wind was soft. He sang of the days that were and would never be again. He sang of the emptiness that comes when love is taken and the world goes on. He did not beg. He remembered. And as he sang, the walls of the underworld trembled. The shades gathered in silence. The rivers ceased their weeping. Persephone turned her face away, and her eyes shone with something deeper than tears. Even Hades, who ruled all endings and saw the folly of mortal yearning, leaned forward in his seat and did not speak. When the song ended, the silence was a second music. Then Hades, who seldom granted mercy, gave Orpheus a single gift. Eurydice would be allowed to follow him back into the world of the living. She would rise from the halls of the dead and walk behind him. No soul had ever been given such a chance. But there was a condition, and it was simple in words, though heavy in weight. Orpheus must walk ahead of her, and he must not turn to look upon her until both had stepped once more into the sunlit world above. If he looked back, she would vanish forever. And so they began the climb. The way was steep and the darkness thick. Orpheus walked without light and without sound, each footfall echoing louder than a drumbeat. Behind him, he could feel her presence. He imagined her steps, the brush of her hand, the breath that might never come again. But he heard nothing. The underworld gave no comfort. The walls pressed close. The path wound upward, and still she did not speak. He could not know if she stumbled. He could not know if she followed. All he had was his trust, and the silence that surrounded it. At last, far ahead, he saw the light. The cave mouth opened like the eye of the world. The air shifted. The scent of trees and soil and rain touched his skin. He stepped forward, and the light wrapped around him like a cloak. And then, overcome by a fear too old to name, he turned. She was there. Her hand was reaching for his. Her face was soft and sad and filled with the beginning of a smile. And then she was gone. No scream, no sound. She faded like smoke, drawn back into the dark, and Orpheus stood alone beneath the sky. He called her name until his voice broke. He ran back into the cave, but the gate would not open again. He sang, but the songs no longer opened doors. The gods had given him a chance, and he had turned too soon. He wandered the world for the rest of his days, silent and unshaven, his lyre silent at his side. He would not sing for others. He would not laugh. When he died, torn by wild beasts who did not know the name he carried, it was said that his soul was taken to the underworld. And in those dark halls, he found her again. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is not one of triumph. It is a song that ends on a broken chord, but it remains because it speaks to all who have loved and all who have lost. It is the memory of music sung in the face of silence, and of a man who dared to bring the dead home and almost did. The underworld keeps many secrets, but this one it lets echo again and again for all who dare to listen. There are tales that speak of love so deep it defies the grave. There are songs that praise the hero who walks into the shadowed land and returns, carrying the warmth of life back from the hands of death. But among the myths passed down from the time of bronze and fire, there also live stories of arrogance, of those who did not descend into Hades for love or redemption, but for pride, and who paid for that pride with the weight of centuries. Of these, none is darker and none more cautionary than the tale of Theseus and Pirithous, two heroes of great renown who dared to challenge the throne of the underworld, not through war or prayer, but through a plan that even the gods would call folly. Theseus was a prince of Athens, born of mortal blood and divine will, a man who traced his lineage to Poseidon and who had carved his name into legend with the edge of his sword and the weight of his deeds. He had journeyed through labyrinths and broken the spine of monsters. He had brought order where there was chaos. His name was spoken across the Aegean with both reverence and fear. Pirithous, king of the Lapiths, was his equal in courage, though perhaps not in wisdom. They had once fought each other, and finding themselves matched in battle, had clasped hands in brotherhood. From that day forward, they were bound not by blood, but by honor and shared ambition, a friendship forged in the crucible of strength. But strength, when untempered by humility, becomes the seed of ruin. After many campaigns, after triumphs piled high like trophies, the two companions turned their eyes not to conquest but to marriage. Not content to wed mortal women, they swore to claim wives worthy of their legend. Theseus chose Helen, daughter of Zeus, though she was but a child then, radiant with the beauty that would one day light fires of war. He took her from her home and left her in the care of his mother, promising to return when she had come of age. Pirithous, seeking to match or even surpass this act, set his sights upon Persephone, the queen of the underworld. No mortal had dared speak her name with such intent. She was the daughter of Demeter, the bride of Hades, sovereign over all that slept beneath the world. To love her was to court death. To take her was to defy the order of all things. Yet Pirithous believed himself mighty enough, and Theseus, bound by oaths and pride, agreed to the venture. Together, they descended into the realm of the dead, not with sorrow, nor with reverence, but with purpose darkened by desire. They did not carry offerings. They did not seek permission. They came as thieves into a kingdom where time itself stood watch, and where no ambition passed unseen. The underworld did not rage. It did not cry out. It simply received them. The shadows thickened. The air grew dense. And before long, the two heroes found themselves before the throne of Hades and Persephone. The king of the dead sat in silence, his face carved from the same stone that shaped the walls of his domain. The queen beside him bore no expression, only the deep and unblinking calm of one who has seen all grief and who wears it like a crown. Hades offered them hospitality. He invited them to sit, and the two heroes, proud and unafraid, accepted. They sat upon a great rock that rose from the earth like a monument. No sooner had they lowered themselves than the stone shifted beneath them. It was no seat at all, but a trap woven from enchantment and wrath. Their flesh froze, their limbs locked, the very marrow of their bones clung to the stone, and their muscles refused to obey. It was called the Chair of Forgetfulness, a throne of punishment meant for those who came unbidden and with wicked intent. There they remained, silent and still, their minds swimming with dread, unable to cry out, unable to rise. The underworld had judged them the moment they arrived, and it had passed its sentence without need of trial. Time passed, though they could not feel it. Dust settled upon their skin. Their names faded from the tongues of men. In the world above, new heroes rose, and the old stories turned to legend. Only Heracles, in the course of his 12 labors, descended to the underworld and came upon them. At the bidding of the gods, and only through force of strength blessed by Olympus, he pulled Theseus from the stone. But even Heracles, strongest of mortals, could not move Pirate House. The earth had claimed him too deeply. He had reached for the bride of death, and death had closed her hand around him. Theseus returned to the world of the living, but he was never again the man he had been. His fortunes turned. His throne was taken. His people cast him out. He wandered until he died on foreign soil, unremembered by those he once ruled. The gods had not forgotten his trespass, even if he had been spared. He had descended without cause. He had sought to steal what was never his. And the underworld, though silent, does not forgive easily. Thus, the tale of Theseus and Pirate House passed into the scrolls of warning, a story not of heroism, but of ambition shattered by the immutable laws of the dead. The underworld is a realm of balance. It does not open for desire. It does not answer pride with mercy. Those who enter must come with grief or truth or a soul weighed by love. Those who come seeking to take what belongs to its king and queen shall find only silence and stone. And Pirate House remains there still, seated in darkness, forgotten by all but the earth itself, a ghost locked in place by the hand of the realm he thought to defy. His name is no longer spoken in hope, it is spoken only in warning. The underworld, vast and hollow as a forgotten cathedral, is not merely a realm of silence and souls. It is guarded by creatures born before memory, raised in the dark womb of the earth, shaped not for beauty nor for wisdom, but for terror and obedience. These are not beasts as men know them. They do not hunger for meat nor flee the light. They are the children of ancient forces, placed in the chasms and gates of Hades to keep the dead from fleeing and the living from trespassing. They do not sleep. They do not dream. They wait. And when the sacred order is broken, they rise to restore it. Among them, there is one whose name has never faded from the tongues of poets and priests. Cerberus, the hound of Hades, stands eternal guard at the threshold between the world of the living and the kingdom of the dead. His form is monstrous, though poets struggle to fix its shape. Most speak of 3 heads, each one crowned with snapping jaws and eyes that glow like coals beneath ash. His back bristles with serpents, and his tail curls with a mind of its own, venomous and watchful. His breath is hot with the stench of the tomb, and his bark echoes through caverns that have never known sunlight. Cerberus was born of Echidna and Typhon, a mother of monsters and a father of storms. His siblings were creatures of nightmare, the Hydra, the Chimera, the Sphinx, but none were entrusted with a task so sacred as his. Hades himself placed him at the gates of the underworld, not as a tormentor, but as a sentinel. His jaws do not seek the innocent dead. His fury is reserved for those who would escape their fate or breach the stillness of the afterlife. He is the guardian of order, the watcher who never blinks. Only a handful of mortals have ever passed him without bloodshed. Orpheus, as the songs tell us, lulled him to sleep with the sound of grief-struck strings. Heracles, in his labours, wrestled him into submission with bare hands, guided by the favour of Persephone. Aeneas, the Trojan exile, cast to him honeyed bread soaked in sedative herbs. All others, whether bold or foolish, found in Cerberus a barrier more final than death itself. He does not speak. He does not reason. He is the wall of fangs at the edge of the abyss. But Cerberus is not the only guardian. There are others whose fury is more cunning, more personal, more ancient still. The Erinyes, whom the Romans would call the Furies, move through the underworld like wind through a scorched field. They are the daughters of earth and sky, born of blood spilled in the earliest days of the world, before the gods had thrones, before men built temples. Their number is uncertain, sometimes 3, sometimes more, but their names echo through every tongue that knows guilt: Alecto, Tisiphone, and Megaera. They are not monsters in form. They wear the shape of women, but their eyes burn with judgment, and serpents twist through their hair like living crowns. They do not guard the gates. They are hunters. They seek out oaths broken, blood spilled without justice, the cries of the innocent that echo unanswered. They pursue those crimes not judged in life and punish them in death. They fly without wings. They appear without warning. They strike not with claws or swords, but with madness, despair, and the slow rot of guilt that can hollow even the proudest heart. When a soul enters the underworld with sins unatoned, the Erinyes are there, silent and still, until the sentence begins. They do not bargain. They do not forgive. Their presence is not a threat. It is a promise. Beneath even them dwell creatures more primal still, beasts that do not serve, but dwell as part of the landscape of Tartarus. They have no names, for they are older than language. Some crawl through the rivers of fire. Some roost in caves carved by screams. There are shades twisted by their own evil into forms unrecognizable, their limbs reshaped by hatred, their mouths forever open in soundless agony. There are serpents whose coils encircle islands of stone. There are worms large as ships, blind and pale, feeding on whatever stumbles into their domain. These are not punishers. They are the punishment made flesh, the chaos that waits at the edge of even divine control. It is said that near the deepest pit, where the titans lie chained in silence, there are guardians made of bronze, statues that bleed molten tears and speak only to the gods. It is said that giants born in the old wars still pace there, bound to the causeways that overlook the prison of their fathers. And there are watchers with 1,000 eyes, who never sleep, who see not through sight but through memory, so that nothing that has ever passed through the gates of Hades can be forgotten. All these beings, though different in form and purpose, serve one law, that the dead must remain where they lie, that the boundaries of life and death must not be breached by hubris or defiance. The gods rule Olympus. The sea belongs to Poseidon. The earth is walked by mortals and beasts. But the underworld is a kingdom apart, a domain that watches in silence, defended not by armies, but by these sacred terrors who guard its laws with patience that never fades and fury that never tires. And so they remain, at the gates and in the shadows, watching. Cerberus crouched with ears raised, the Furies circling like storm crows in the gloom, the monsters of the pit stirring in their ancient sleep. They are not evil. They are necessary. They are the teeth and eyes and silence of the land that waits for all. In the underworld, the land is shaped not only by stone and shadow, but by water that does not nourish and does not cleanse. It is a land veined with rivers that do not run to oceans, rivers that have never known rain, rivers born not of clouds or mountains, but of sorrow, wrath, and eternal truth. These rivers do not follow the laws of nature. They do not seek the sea. They wind like serpents through the hollows of the dead, cutting paths through ash and bone, through iron gates and forgotten valleys. They are not merely features of the land. They are its lifeblood. They are its law. Of these rivers, there are 5, each with a name older than temples, and each with a nature older than gods. They are Acheron, Cocytus, Phlegethon, Lethe, and Styx. To know these names is to know something of the soul's journey after death, for each river marks a part of the passage between worlds, each a thread in the weaving of judgment and fate. The first is Acheron, the river of pain. Its name is spoken quietly in the Eleusinian rites and written in trembling lines upon the tablets of the dead. It is the river most often encountered by the newly departed, for it is Acheron that winds near the borderlands between life and death, the first to greet the soul and to carry it from the realm of breath into the shadowed dominion of Hades. Its waters are dark and sluggish, thick with sorrow, flowing not from spring or mountain, but from the endless tears of mortals who died unfulfilled. The souls who ride its current often do so in silence, for the pain that seeps into them is not sharp but deep, a hollowing sorrow that numbs more than it wounds. Charon the ferryman plies this river with his ancient bark, guiding souls across in return for coin placed beneath the tongue or upon the eyes of the dead. Those who were not buried properly or whose families failed in their duties may wander the banks of Acheron for 100 years, unable to cross, weeping without voice, forgotten by both the living and the dead. The second is Cocytus, the river of lamentation. Its path coils through the colder regions of the underworld, its waters thin and glassy, and always whispering with voices that do not end. Where Acheron is pain that dulls, Cocytus is grief that sings. The souls who wander near it are those consumed by mourning, mothers who lost their children, warriors who died for nothing, lovers separated by fate. The air above Cocytus trembles with the sound of crying, a sound that never rises nor fades, a sound that has no source and no silence. The Furies are said to walk along its banks, drawn by the bitterness of the cries, and the judges of the dead sometimes pause here, for it is from Cocytus that the sentences of vengeance often rise. It is a river of memory sharpened into agony, a river that cuts not with stones, but with the weight of what cannot be undone. The third is Phlegethon, the river of fire. Its name means blazing, and it lives up to its name in all ways. It does not burn as mortal flame burns. Its fire is not yellow nor red, but a deep, throbbing orange streaked with black, and it flows not across the surface of the ground, but through underground chasms and molten tunnels where the worst of the damned are kept. It is said that Phlegethon encircles Tartarus and that its flames are fed by the crimes of the ancient enemies of Olympus, the Titans, the traitors, the oath-breakers. It does not consume, it tortures. Its fire is cold to the touch, and yet it burns deeper than any wound. No soul touches Phlegethon and emerges whole. The river does not cleanse, it brands, it marks, it punishes. The fourth is Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Unlike the others, its course winds softly through the quieter regions of the underworld, near the fields of asphodel, where the ordinary dead dwell. Its waters are pale and still. Those who drink from Lethe forget their lives, their names, their pain, their joy. It is not a punishment, but a mercy, though some say it is the cruelest mercy of all. The dead who drink from Lethe lose the burdens of memory, but they also lose the thread of who they were. Some souls resist it, clinging to identity with trembling hands. Others kneel by its banks without hesitation. The priests of mystery cults believed that to drink from Lethe was to prepare for reincarnation, for rebirth without the poison of past sins. Yet others whispered of another river, Mnemosyne, the opposite of Lethe, a spring known only to the initiated, whose waters preserved memory rather than dissolved it. Lethe is gentle, but its silence is final. Once drunk, the past is gone, and the soul becomes a shadow among shadows. The fifth, and most feared, is Styx, the river of hatred and of sacred oath. It is the oldest and most terrible of the five. Its waters are black as pitch and deadly to the touch. Even the gods themselves fear it, for to swear an oath upon Styx is to bind oneself beyond all escape. The river runs through the deepest valleys of the underworld and coils around the palace of Hades like a living serpent. When the Olympians fought the Titans, it was Styx who sided with Zeus, and as a reward, her waters were made the foundation of divine law. Any god who swore falsely upon the river would fall senseless for 9 years, cast out from the councils of Olympus and shamed before all. No mortal may touch its waters and live. It is said that even Achilles, who was bathed in it by his mother, bore the scar of its kiss upon his heel, the one place it did not touch. Styx is not a river of rage, but of cold hatred, and its current carries the weight of all curses spoken in earnest. These rivers are not merely symbolic, they are substance and power, geography and spirit. They divide the underworld into realms not of space, but of meaning. They shape the journey of every soul, and they remind even the gods that some laws are older than Olympus, older than time. They were here when the world was young, and they shall remain when the stars grow cold. To cross them is to pass beyond what is known. To drink from them is to be changed forever. In the underworld, there are no roads. There are only the rivers. They mark the passage. They carry the sentence. They offer no destination, only the deep and eternal truth that death is not silence, but order, a structure woven from sorrow and flame, from oath and forgetfulness, from grief and hatred and pain. The rivers flow without end, and in their flow, the shape of the dead is preserved. The dead are silent, but the living have never ceased to speak for them. From the earliest days, when men scratched prayers into clay and burned offerings at the mouths of caves, to the shining marble temples of the classical age, the shadow of the underworld hung over every ritual, every rite, every sacrifice. It was not merely the destination of souls, but a presence within the breath of the living, a truth as enduring as the seasons, as constant as the stars. The Greeks did not fear death as a moment, but as a place ruled by ancient laws, inhabited by unseen powers, and bridged only by the ceremonies passed from priest to priest, from mother to daughter, from mourner to grave. To understand the way the Greeks revered the underworld is to look not at their temples to the gods of the sky, but at the rites held at night, in caves, in groves, in the secret corners of cities. It is to look at the Eleusinian mysteries, those ancient and guarded ceremonies in honor of Demeter and Persephone, where thousands gathered in silence and awe, year after year, walking the path of the initiate, reenacting the sorrow of the goddess and the descent of her daughter into the land of the dead. The mysteries promised not wealth or power, but knowledge, the kind that comes only when one has stared into the abyss and not turned away. What was revealed there was never written, never spoken aloud. But it was believed that those who completed the rites walked away changed, not shielded from death, but prepared for it, strengthened by the vision of Persephone's return and the unspoken promise that death, like winter, was not an end, but a turning. The underworld lived also in the cults of the chthonic deities, those gods whose power rose not from the heavens but from the earth itself. Offerings to Hades were made by night, in deep pits or low altars, with the smoke sent downward instead of upward. He was not worshipped in joy, but in solemnity, not asked for favor in battle or harvest, but propitiated to ensure the balance between worlds was not disturbed. The name of Hades was rarely spoken directly. Euphemisms were used. The unseen one, the wealthy, the receiver of many, not from scorn, but from reverence, from the belief that to speak his true name too freely might draw his attention, might bend the line between breath and shadow a little too thin. The same was true of Persephone, whose dual nature made her both the maiden of spring and the queen of the pit. She was honored with flowers in one hand and black goats in the other. The women who mourned her abduction each autumn did so with the knowledge that she would rise again, bringing green to the fields and grain to the mills. Yet they also knew that part of her never returned, that part of her remained beside the throne of her husband, watching over the souls who walked the silent halls. Her worship was therefore not light-hearted nor tragic. It was layered, rich, woven from both joy and grief, and those who followed her did not seek escape from death, but a place within it. The ancient Greeks buried their dead with care born of deep belief. Coins were placed with the corpse, one beneath the tongue or upon the eyes, to pay the ferryman Charon and ensure safe passage across the river. Without it, the soul might be stranded, wandering the banks of Acheron for generations. Libations were poured upon the graves, especially on certain nights of the year, when the veil between worlds thinned and the dead were believed to draw near. Families returned again and again to tend the tombs, to speak the names of the lost, to ensure they were not forgotten. For to forget a soul was to let it fade into asphodel without identity, without place, without peace. There were darker rituals as well, rites meant to summon or appease the dead. Necromancy was not a parlor trick, but a dangerous act, one that required the proper names, the proper herbs, the proper blood. The dead were not to be summoned lightly, for their voices came with cold and their truths were sharp. Oracles at certain sites, especially at necromantic shrines near rivers or caves, would sometimes serve as intermediaries between the worlds. The most famous of these was the Necromantian on the banks of the Acheron itself, where supplicants would descend into labyrinthine tunnels, fasting and purifying themselves for days before calling upon the spirits to speak. It was not spectacle, it was terror made sacred. And yet, despite the fear and the silence, the underworld was always there. Beneath every harvest, behind every prayer for long life, beneath every wedding vow and cradle song. The gods of Olympus reigned from above, but the power that waited below was no less real, no less vast. It shaped the laws of piety, of burial, of sacrifice. It whispered in the wind that passed through olive groves at dusk. It hovered over the battlefield, waiting for the final breath. It dwelled in the dark corners of the hearth, in the spaces between stories told by firelight. The underworld was not hell. It was not paradise. It was a reflection of the mortal world, divided, ordered, mysterious. Though the gods of Olympus fell silent with the turning of ages, and the rites once whispered in sacred groves faded from the tongues of priests and mourners, the underworld did not vanish. It did not crumble like a forgotten temple. nor dissolve like smoke into myth. Instead, it sank deeper into the veins of human thought, seeping into the poetry of new tongues, reshaping itself within the dreams and dreads of generations far removed from the marble and fire of ancient Greece. The underworld endured, not as place alone, but as symbol and shadow, as an inheritance passed from memory to metaphor, as the unseen bedrock of all reflections on death, judgment, and the nature of what lies beyond the veil. In the world that followed the old gods, the underworld re-emerged in altered forms, yet always familiar in its bones. The Roman mind, so fond of order and jurisprudence, reshaped Hades into Disparta, the rich and silent sovereign of the dead. Though cloaked in Latin and iron, he bore the same grave authority, the same unyielding gaze, the same domain beneath the feet of men. The poets of Rome walked the same paths as their Greek forebears. Virgil led Aeneas into the underworld, not merely to awe his readers, but to affirm that Rome, too, must reckon with its dead. His words echoed Homer's, but carried their own weight: civic, moral, imperial. The rivers still flowed, the Furies still shrieked, and the judgment of Minos was not forgotten. Later still, as Christianity rose and cast the old gods into silence, the structure of the Greek underworld remained a scaffold beneath the towers of theology. The vision of hell carried by medieval priests owes as much to Hades as it does to scripture. The rivers were renamed or hidden, but they still flowed. Tartarus stretched into a pit of damnation, and the idea of eternal punishment endured, shaped by centuries of myth. The Inferno imagined by Dante was not merely invention, but a map drawn from the memories of ancient dread, populated by spirits who cry like the lost along the banks of Cocytus. The idea that sin bore spatial consequence, that the soul's passage after death moved through levels and gates and valleys of judgment, that was Greek in its marrow. In literature, the underworld became a mirror for the living. It was the place where heroes proved their worth, not through battle, but by endurance, by facing the truth of what they had done and who they truly were. Odysseus, Aeneas, Heracles, each had descended and returned, and in doing so, changed. That descent, that catabasis, became a structure copied across centuries. When later poets and playwrights sent their characters into the dark, it was not merely a narrative device, but a reenactment of something older, sacred, and solemn. Even the songs of modern times, when they speak of crossing rivers, of shadows, of silent judges and wandering souls, are repeating notes first played upon the lyre of Orpheus. Philosophers, too, could not leave the underworld behind. Plato, who spoke of the soul and its nature, placed great importance upon the idea of posthumous judgment. He borrowed from the myths to explain morality, to give shape to the consequences of injustice. In his writings, the journey of the soul after death became not only a belief, but a parable for life itself. To live rightly, one had to live as though the judges of Hades were watching, as though Lethean Styx waited to offer their waters, as though every deed carried its own weight into the grave. In art, the themes of the underworld are eternal. Painters of the Renaissance reached for the images of Persephone and Hades, of Charon ferrying the dead across black water, of Sisyphus with his stone, of Tantalus reaching for what he would never taste. Sculptors chiseled the torments and passions of the dead into marble. Dramatists returned again and again to Eurydice and Orpheus, to Medea's descent, to the endless questions asked in the dark. In every brushstroke and every line of verse, the underworld was not simply a setting. It was the truth beneath the world, the silence that frames the music of life. Even in the minds of the common folk, long after temples had been torn down and the last oracle silenced, the memory of Hades and his kingdom remained. Superstitions lingered in the corners of villages and city streets. Coins were still placed with the dead in parts of Greece and Italy. Grave markers bore prayers to Hermes Psychopompos. Dreams of rivers and caves persisted, and the feeling that beneath every stone hill and shadowed grove there might be a path leading downward, a place where the old gods waited in stillness, where the dead remembered the living and watched in silence. And so the underworld, once ruled by the crowned silence of Hades and the cold beauty of Persephone, lives on. It has changed its mask, as all things do, but the bones beneath remain the same. It is the place beyond, the realm where judgment is final, where sorrow has shape and time folds inward. It is not gone. It never was. It waits in the corners of thought and in the oldest dreams. And so the underworld, once ruled by the crowned silence of Hades and the cold beauty of Persephone, lives on. It has changed its mask, as all things do, but the bones beneath remain the same. It is the place beyond, the realm where judgment is final, where sorrow has shape and time folds inward. It is not gone. It never was. It waits in the corners of thought and in the oldest dreams. It speaks in the hush of graveyards, in the flickering candlelight of rituals long forgotten, in the stories told to children to explain the dark. The gods may have fallen silent, but the underworld endures, not as a tomb, but as a mirror, not as a threat, but as a truth. In every tale we tell of loss, of memory, of what lies after, we return to it. We walk again along the banks of Styx. We hear the wings of the Furies above us. We glimpse the halls of shadow and know, if only for a moment, that the land of the dead is not behind us, but beneath us, waiting to receive us all.